Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today.
A quest for more knowledge, a quest to learn more, a quest to kind of always try and reach where you want to be. The danger is you never get there. So Maslow's hierarchy, all of that, you never really get to the top. So there's a fine balance to tread. But I thought, as long as I'm going in the right direction, because, the military taught me you either gain ground or you lose it. You don't stay the same. No, you need that self-discipline, that motivation, that will to sort of, push yourself on. Otherwise, you'll fail yourself. What I experienced in the military was a structured system of assessment and priorities. Don't deviate from it. And everybody knew it. It was well drilled. It was well organised. If someone is severely bleeding and it's from an act of aggression, it needs another act of aggression to manage it. That was our attitude.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. And Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Pete. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for allowing me to be on the podcast, along with some other so many great people have been on this.
We're getting there, mate. We're getting there slowly but surely. I feel like it's the brave people like yourself, like Neil, like some of the other subject matter experts who are taking those first tentative steps into this weird and wonderful world of technology. And podcasting is just one medium and one way that we sort of translate that to other people and get the message out there about the emergency services. But you've got to be brave to do it, because people worry, what's going to happen? Is it going to go wrong? But yeah, it's interesting because of the people. Certainly not because of me. It's because of such as yourself and people that have got that colossal amount of experience and authenticity. So yeah, I really appreciate your time, brother.
I think you're putting me up on a pedestal, but that's okay.
You know what the irony is though? You already know everything you know. That's what I always say to people. And people don't think they have an interesting story or an interesting life or even interesting experiences because you were there for all of it. So when you connect the dots looking backwards, you were like, oh yeah, I suppose, yeah, well, maybe. I mean, I did kind of do the thing and I've been part of this and I have been working in this sector for X number of years. But yeah, it's kind of like that self-deprecating thing. We have it in the Western world. We don't like to maybe like scream and shout about each other very much. It's a weird thing. I don't know why that is.
It is. But I'll try my best and I'll try and live up to the standard.
Mate, so for people that are unfamiliar, obviously you come to us from IRRTC, but as I was having a conversation, previously with one of your colleagues, Neil, learning a little bit more about the aspects that you cover within this sector, both from your history as in a medic, both as a trainer within the military, some of the specialisms you do within trench rescue. So for people that are completely unfamiliar with you, could you give us like the elevator pitch, a whistle-stop tour of your kind of background in the sector and the emergency services?
Okay, as brief as possible. Joined the military as sort of a teenager, I suppose. Always wanted to do that. Come from a family history of military, grandfather, father, uncles, all that kind of stuff. So it seemed like the right thing to do. But as I was going through that journey, I started to see things that really took an interest in. So very quickly, I started to get an interest in sort of medical kind of sort of interests, and I always liked that when I was at school as well. I did PE as a subject and physics as a subject, and so I already was like the biological and the anatomy and physiology side. So that was already there. But then in the military, I could see I was always sort of encouraged to pick a role and look at what they do and ask why they do it, and that's kind of your motivation to be like them, sort of always kind of advancing. They called it pursuit of excellence. That sounds corny, but I thought it was a good way to think,
There is something about the military. There's almost an expected continual development. I mean, we talk about CPD and the emergency services, but with the greatest respect, some people will sometimes become a firefighter or a police officer, and they may stay in that position or role for the rest of their career. But that doesn't mean they can't continue to develop. I mean, a lot of the courses that you run are open to people at, almost all ranks and positions, and people can continue to develop in the same role. But some people hear development and they think it automatically means promotion, but that's not necessarily the case, especially in the military.
No, it isn't. But I saw this opportunity to progress into what you could maybe say was a little bit of a niche, a little bit of a specialism, and some people were learning trades, other people were learning other skills, and I thought, actually, if I think about this right, I can get a good footing in the military that will then maybe serve me well as a civilian thereafter. Yeah. So that was kind of that seed planted, and that was sort of the route I went down. So after some time in the military, I then took an interest in getting a normal life, if you like, as a civilian, because
that is the downside of the military, isn't it? It's almost all-consuming because you move around places, and if your family can or can't come with you, it's almost like it's not just a vocation; it's an entire lifestyle, isn't it?
It is, and I didn't want to sort of get into a relationship and start a family in that world, because it's a terrible strain.
It's littered with tragic stories of it not going right sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah. So, and I thought, that's not good. So this isn't something, a family and all of that isn't something I can do in this role, in this world. It needs to be something that's a little bit more structured, not structured, but a little bit more sort of, you're around more, you're not away, all that kind of stuff. So, So then I looked at, I had the opportunity to get involved with a small business. I was into motorcycling at the time. And so I passed my direct access to ride a full-size motorcycle. Loved that. Really got into that. And the guys I did it with saw something in me, and they became friends and all the rest of it. There's a big social side to it. And they ended up inviting me to become part of the business, which I did. I did that for a little while. That sort of faded a little bit. And then I had an opportunity to get into the NHS. So I took that. So I then had to go to university, sort of, as an adult, sort of slightly more mature kind of students.
What was that like? Because a lot of people struggle with the adult education side of stuff. You've kind of been out of the habit of learning in that academic environment, haven't you, for a long time?
I love that side of it. I love that side of it. And I was probably a real pain in the backside in lectures, because if a technical question was asked, I'd answer it. And I thought, probably to the dismay of some of my colleagues, fellow students in the lecture theatre. But I just thought, I'm here once, and I've got to make the best of this. And so, it wasn't a university where I was living in, so I didn't do that whole, away from home kind of adventure that it is, or certainly that it used to be, I guess. So, because I had my own home, and I was doing it as a more mature student, so I could be more serious about it. It wasn't an adventure; it was a pathway to another direction. So I took it very seriously, I suppose. And and the thing is, when you're
what did you study?
Older,
sorry,
you see, I did my adult nurse training, actually.
I love it.
So in the military, I'd done my combat medical technician. I'd worked through that, the various levels.
Is that like a tangible qualification you actually come out with? Because that is one of the complaints about certainly people in the fire and emergency services, and also maybe the military, is you've got a lot of experience and like internal courses, but sometimes they're not recognized when you come out, is the problem, isn't it?
I think now it's changed a lot. I think, if you were to go down that route now, at that time, let's say an individual was a paramedic, a military paramedic at that time. We're going back to the 90s now. That kind of era. It wouldn't have been recognized outside the military. Today, we have civilian and military students learning together. So, and many trusts, many NHS trusts do that. So if you were to qualify now in any healthcare professional capacity within the military, it would be recognised sort of in the NHS too. It's sort of, so it's very different now. But then the qualification wasn't recognised outside of the military. But it was a one hell of a tool to consolidate to then, sort of go down the route then of a different discipline in a different way, sort of further building on that experience, I suppose.
What do you think it is that makes it such a small number of people in I think all sectors? When I look at police as an example, fire service and also military, you only get a small amount of people within those sectors have a desire to go down the medic or the trauma route. I've always had a massive appetite for it, and I've done the workplace trainer stuff. And my brother-in-law is a paramedic. He came out of the RAF and then retrained as a paramedic, and I go and ride along to stuff with him. But some people, it really is it's a Marmite kind of thing, isn't it?
I suppose maybe I couldn't speak for others, but it's sort of, I felt like it was like a fire inside myself, really. A quest for more knowledge, a quest to learn more, a quest to kind of always try and reach where you want to be. The danger is you never get there. So Maslow's hierarchy, all of that, you never really get to the top. So there's a fine balance to tread. But I thought, as long as I'm going in the right direction, because, the military taught me you either gain ground or you lose it. You don't stay the same, though. So you need that self-discipline, that motivation, that will to sort of, push yourself on. Otherwise, you'll fail yourself.
That's a great analogy, because you're right. Everything else is continually moving forward. Life is continually ongoing. And if you're not continuing to develop yourself, then actually you're not staying still. You're going backwards. You just don't realize it.
This is it. So that's why, again, it sounds really corny, but never assume. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Keep going forward. That's the mindset, really, if you like. I can't always use it every day, but I do try. But
I find it like a constant reset button. I feel like I have to constantly bang it, because you can lose that self-awareness and you can almost get blinkered into your own world and either fall in love with yourself and feel like you know it all already, or equally think that you're completely useless. I have it all the time when I have guests on the podcast, and you thought you knew something before, and then you speak to somebody like yourself, a subject matter expert, and you're like, oh, right, don't know anything at all. I'm literally on step 4, and I thought there was 10 steps. It turns out it's 348, and I'm still on step 4.
Yeah, well, this is it, I suppose. Again, I suppose you measure yourself against your peers, and I think humble is best. I think, yes. And I've always tried to be grounded and humble, but sometimes I can be a little bit forward and a bit direct at times, and I suppose that could maybe occasionally be misunderstood for some kind of arrogance. It really isn't, though, because I'm a person that goes away and reflects, and I give myself a real hard time if I've not done something as well as I would have liked.
But I also get worried if we lose that level of assertiveness in the emergency services, and even just in society in general. That assertiveness is really, really important. And I hate when it does get misinterpreted as overconfidence or ego, or even being rude or something like that. I think especially in our domain, in the emergency response first responder community, we do need to maintain that and almost protect it from people misinterpreting it.
Yeah, I think you're right. So as I was going through that training, it was done over a 3-year period. There would be 7 weeks of theory. There would be, and then you would go out for 7 weeks in clinical practice to try and link the two together, over a period of time. And at the end of it, you would acquire a certain amount of hours, both theory and practical, to then satisfy the governing body at the time, and you would go through that route to then qualify, and I suppose the analogy would be, if you compare it to your driving test, you learn to pass your test, but you learn to drive when you've got your license. That is so true. That is so true. And but what I started to see, and we're going back to 2009 now, when I've done the time at university, what I started to see in that student journey, which was wonderful, and there were some not so good experiences along the way, I kept reflecting on the fact that I didn't feel like I belonged there. Okay. And I sensed that if there was a mistake made, I thought, no one's going to support me. I feel like I'd be on my own with it. And that wasn't the same sort of, I didn't have that experience with the previous sort of industry I was in, the military. It was very much a family. And I didn't feel like
I always think about that with paramedics, especially when they're riding by themselves in a car. I'm like, but even from a mental health perspective, they don't have the opportunity to reflect, to debrief, to dissipate the stress, to shared accountability. I mean, we need to take personal accountability where it's due. But I do think that's an untold story about the challenges. We all think we're in the same job or the same sector. We are, but we're really not. We're all experiencing something very different.
You're right. So I kind of subconsciously made a decision, I think, in the second or the beginning of the third year of that training, that I don't think I want to work for this NHS full time. Yeah. And that was just my experience. I mean, I've done training at a couple of different trusts in the West Midlands, and and my experience was, I don't think this is going to be for me long term. So I spoke to a couple of people I'd got to know along the way, and they said to me, "Look, tell you what, get to the end of your journey, get your qualification, decide what you want to do." And I sort of saw myself wanting to go down a route of teaching others. I've done some instructor courses in the military, and I've been really motivated by some very, very passionate instructors in the military. And that was quite inspirational, sort of, right, I want to be like them. Why did they do it? All of that kind of stuff that, I was encouraged to do sort of, years before, that then started to take over. So the route I went down was to join an agency and not actually work for a trust full time.
Okay.
And at that time then, I moved to Staffordshire, and I had the opportunity to take a look at the fire service and, Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service. There were some opportunities to join that organisation, and I went down that route, and sort of, which then starts to take us down the direction of where we've gone today.
So how old would you have been then when you joined the fire service?
Off the top of my head, I would have been early 30s. Yeah, sort of like mid 30s, really. Yeah.
What a great colossal wealth of knowledge and experience to bring in. It must have been weird coming in as a recruit. Again, like you say, in adult education, like you're standing around people who are all on the start of one journey, but so many people have already been on different journeys in the past as well, especially, and I love that about having people of different ages and different experiences now coming into the sector.
It was great, and I thought to myself, right, now what I need to do is take myself back quite a few years, and there's a game to play here. You just got to say yes, 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 never say no. Ask a question why, but certain words were taken out of my vocabulary for an amount of time just to get through. But it is another little journey to go down, and it was a fulfilling one. But there was an interesting experience where I was told that my shoes were too shiny. So basically, I was told that your shoes are too shiny, Maybin, and you either need to dull yours down or everybody needs to lift their standards up. So one instructor said that to me. Another instructor took me to the side. Again, someone to kind of look towards and emulate. And this guy was a former Royal Marine Commando, really great guy. He'd been a PTA in the Royal Marines as well. And he said to me, "Don't change a thing. You leave it just the way it is." Okay? And this guy, we were both the same height. And for anybody that knows me out there, I'm not very tall. So I thought, us little guys, just scraping 5'8" if we were lucky. We need to look after each other. So I went with that because I thought that was the right way to go.
No, I love that. And you don't want to encourage people to dull their light, for want of a better description, just to make everybody else feel a little bit better.
Yeah, no, exactly. And
that's a scary spiral to go down. If we continue that idea, that often to me is the death of a lot of great cultures.
Yeah, it is, and the service, and I don't mind saying, but I thought, I thought, well, this isn't as disciplined as I thought it was going to be. I mean, again, I thought, right, you've got to be careful now, Mike. You've got to not do what you normally do, and sort of, misjudge this or take it in the wrong way. But the any experience that I'd had during my NHS training, and before that, I thought, right, mistakes I've made, I need to learn from, not make again, blah blah blah. But what I couldn't escape was, I thought, this just feels woolly, and yeah, and it's like, but I was learning core skills. I was moving on to more specialist modules, sort of RTC, water, BA, so I thought, actually, I am enjoying it. I'm learning new skills, but I was looking at some of the people thinking, where's the discipline?
Yes.
I was starting to sense it, and it really struck me then when I went out to a station and sort of, then I really saw it and thought, I'm struggling with this,
Mate, I feel that struggle all the time, and I've got it tattooed on my forearm. It's like I'm no better than anybody else. It's not a better, or it's just a different thing, and I really, really struggle with it. And especially like if we zoom out for a second and just look at that cultural or societal aspect to it, because something did shift, and I'm not sure what it is, but like with my kids, they come out and they muck out the horses in the morning with us, sort of 6 a.m. and those little things, for me, are really important, and they might seem wishy-washy to other people, and some people might even go to the far end of the spectrum and say, oh, that's abusive, making your kids pick up horse poo in the morning, all this sort of stuff. But I'm like, behave yourself. It's self-discipline. You shouldn't expect the world to impose discipline upon you. That's really sad if the world has had to do that, because your own self-disciplines have slipped to an extent where you can't even hold yourself accountable to some of the fundamentals.
Yeah, I suppose. But what I have come to learn is that, you kind of can't impose your will on others. People are the way they are. But I have also learned that you can influence positively the things that are around you, in a small way.
Yeah.
But it's unachievable to try and, change things that are sort of,
Don't set yourself on fire just to keep the rest of the world warm. It doesn't work. And also, there's a great quote by, I forget the guy's name, but he says, don't send ducks to Eagle School. It's just recognizing the person that's in front of you and where they're kind of at, what their interpretation of good looks like. And if maybe they never want to achieve a similar thing to you, that doesn't make them any better or worse, just makes them different. That's okay.
It is. That's right. But then, as I was going on this journey now, I'm thinking, right, instructors, trainers, look at this. I feel the need to go there. I feel the need to get into that role because, I know what it's like to be on the learning side. I also know what it's like to be on the other side, passing that information to the learner. I'm starting to see, and that was the role that I wanted to get into in the NHS. There was a role called practice development, and I could really see myself going into this practice development role, and potentially, and sort of. But because I didn't go into the NHS full time, I went down going into the fire service and working for an NHS agency for 7 years.
Yeah.
I did those two for a while, and that's when I came across Neil. Neil was the station manager, sort of, in the area of the service that I was in, and Neil introduced us to his passion, extrication, road traffic collision, and I'd seen many cases of traumas coming into the hospital, and I've seen them go through when they come into the emergency department and the resource, and then they're sort of they go into theatre, and you see them operated on.
You've seen that journey theaters beyond where most people see it, or most people just see it. We bundle them in the back of the ambulance, and that's it.
That's it. And I'd seen them then on the ITU, sort of when they'd sort of had their procedure done and all the rest of it. And some wouldn't come out the ITU, some would come into the emergency departments. And there'd be many relatives around at that time around the bed, and there's nothing could be done for them. So I started to see then, when I started to go out to RTC. Plus, I loved when I did my RTC module with the service. I just really started to develop a passion for it and an interest in it. So when I met Neil, I sensed he'd just come back from his secondment at the college for 3 years. So he'd come back as a station manager. So so he was fresh with all that fire service college experience when it was still the fire service college before it went to sort of Capita. So so he brought that back to the service and then started to influence and motivate us. And he mentioned the UKRO and explained what the UKRO was about. He was an assessor for it. So we entered the team and we started to improve. And so so that I then had even more passion for, the topic and the subject, and and I was gaining experience of going to incidents and all the rest of it, and it was good. And on one particular occasion, a couple of occasions, I'd actually been to an RTC in the area where the station was, and then the next day I'd be maybe doing an NHS shift.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I know that patient was conveyed by a land ambulance to that hospital, a major trauma centre in Birmingham. So actually, a couple of times I actually popped up onto the ward to see the casualty that we cut out.
That's great though, and I think that's a real big thing that's missing in a lot of cases, because we don't get to complete that journey in our minds. And sometimes, that can help with the trauma aspect of dealing with what happened to that person.
I know. So I had quite a few experiences like that, and then I had the idea of. So I went to the chief at the time, Peter Dartford, and I had an idea that actually now. I was looking at where health was at that time, and we're talking about 2011 now, 2000, so we're going 12 years ago, we're going back. And I came up with an idea of, at the time, if there was a primary building fire, a house fire, I think most services, certainly our service at that time, did a hot strike. I'm sure you recognise that.
Yeah, hot fire strikes, doors either side, 8 doors across, all that sort of jazz. Visit the local neighbourhood.
Yeah, and obviously, it was obvious that operational demand was starting to go down in the fire service because of prevention, and other organisations were looking at it as being very enviable. And I think there was a report done, the fireworks report. Claire Mansfield wrote it, I think, about sort of how the fire and rescue service has got this enviable reputation of prevention, but they're also a trusted brand, and they can get through doors. So I was looking at this thinking, interested in health and interested in well-being, and I came up with this idea of a health screen. And the idea was that I could use my skills, my experience, my knowledge in my fire service role, but with my health professional's hat on. And I started to, and this was long before Safe and Well visits started. So the way it went was I actually, and Neil encouraged me to do a project initiation document for the service to think about how we could make this bigger, better,
bit of a business
look at
plan,
it as a potential model to use. Yeah, so I did this health screen thing where I could go into a house, or I could put a community event on, or we could encourage people to come to the station, and we could measure all of their vital signs. We could take blood pressure. I could measure cholesterol. I could, I could do blood sugar. I could do urinalysis. I could do a mini mental state assessment on them. I could do lots of things. I picked up some such interesting facts, and I kept a very discreet, confidential record of all of these facts, because Caldecott principles and all of that. And other people started to hear about it. So there was a guy called
How much
Tom
pushback
Embry.
did you get, from like other people in service? Because again, with trauma and first, I was going to say, some people say, oh, it's not our job, it's not this, you're taking money from the NHS, blah, blah, blah. Some people just hate the idea of training on the medical side of stuff at all. But I think it comes back to the why. Like, why did you join the thing? If you joined the thing to help people, well, there's many ways you can help people. But if your thing is, I only want to go to fires, then you know what? You probably ain't going to join the job.
Well, look, you look at where we are today now, resources versus demands.
Yes.
This was very predictable, sort of in 2010, where things might go. And I just thought, what can I do to influence the community around me, where we're not going out to that many operational incidents because operational demand has reduced because of prevention. So maybe, just maybe, the fire as a health asset started to come out at that time. And there was a couple of people in NHS England at the time. Katie Walkin was her name, and she'd heard about this little initiative that I was doing in Staffordshire. And I went further. I went and presented to the local GP practice a referral process. So if I go into a house and I'm doing a home fire safety check, and I'll do a health screen on, let's say, a vulnerable elderly occupant, I could then take that information with confidentiality, and I'm only touching the surface here, and I could set up a referral process to the GP practice.
Yeah.
And the GP practice said, that's fantastic. How do we make that work? So I actually had a referral process set up to local GPs, district nurses. And the idea was that before the elderly lady got the UTI and fell and, required an ambulance response, then needed to be treated in hospital and, the cost of a hospital bed per night. I thought, how do we intervene at point A or B before it becomes a problem at F, G, H? I thought, given we've got this prevention kind of
arm to
reputation,
the service, yeah.
I thought, let's play into that. And I've got skills, and I can sort of be a little bit of the bridge over that expanse of water. And it was, we did a promotional film. I wrote about it in the service magazine. The chief was happy, the dep was happy, the people in the middle weren't, though. So
how did you deal with that? Again, that's a great point, because people often have so many great ideas, and then they always say, oh yeah, we were going to do that in our service, or I had that idea years ago. But often it's getting past that inertia, that like gravitational pull of people screaming, just come and sit back down again, just come and join the group again, don't keep pushing for innovation. And I'll be honest, like in the infancy of the podcast, even probably the first like 2 years, people are like, oh, what are you doing? You sound like a dick. You're talking, nobody cares, nobody's interested. And now, we've reached 400 and something thousand people, but you've almost got to have the energy. And I'm not saying mine is the same as what you do, but there's that type of innovation, trying something different, the brave to go out of the cave and over the hill and just see what's on the other side. That is a diminishing characteristic, I fear. So how did you keep going with that? Was it just blind optimism, or you were just stupid enough to start and driven enough to just keep doing it? What was it?
Neil, as the station manager, was very supportive.
Okay.
And then the group manager above him,
so having champions, having advocates,
retired now as well.
People with you, yeah.
He was brilliant as well. So he sat me down and said, "Look, I can see how keen you are. Of course I can." I said, "But there are problems here." He said, "How can we make this work so that you can carry on this good work?"
Yeah. How can you take people with you?
Attention of others.
Yeah.
And I know what he was trying to say. He was trying to say, look, senior officers are kind of querying this, as it's not a kind of, a stereotypical role. But
outside of our lane a little bit.
Yeah. He said the union might sort of query why you're doing these skills interventions and all of that. He said, look, let's make some professional smoke and mirrors so you can carry on the good work, record the data, evidence it. And then, like I say, it was starting to come to the attention of NHS England. It came to the attention of a guy at the time called Tom Embry. I remember he was the policy advisor for SIFOA before it became the NFCC. And these people were starting to see it. There was another lady in NHS England called Jackie White, and she'd heard about it, and she'd kind of contacted me. So, and I wondered, was that starting to scare the service a little bit? I wonder. I didn't know. So in the end, it didn't really go anywhere, So it might have done, but I just thought, this is probably a battle you're not going to win. So, it sort of fizzled out really, because I don't think the political will at that time was there. But if you look at where we are now,
yes,
it's kind of back then, and that document that was written in 2010 or 2011, this project initiation document detailing everything, costs, benefits, evaluation, all of that. It really was kind of, it was good thinking ahead of the curve, and I wasn't the only person doing it. There were other brilliant people out there trying to do their own little things too in other organizations, and I don't know, it's just, if someone isn't willing to try, nothing's going to happen, is it? So, no. And I just thought, you've got to try then, because, sometimes it's easy to ask for forgiveness and permission, I guess.
That's often my approach, to be honest. I just go out there and do it. The best of intentions, and my moral compass was in the right direction.
Yeah.
So take me back for a second between the differences, for example, like the medical training that you observed coming into the emergency services versus the medical training you did at university or that you saw practiced in the NHS, and then even from back into the military? We all think it falls under the same guise, but the difference between first aid and trauma as an example, and then the differences that you came into when you joined the service.
This is a really great point. And I think maybe people out there, when they listen to this, may agree. They may throw something at the radio and not agree. I don't know, but it's all the same stuff. Basically, we just need a system of priorities, and we just need to manage those priorities in order. And that's all it is. And that system is A, B, C, D, E. That's it. And, I think we make it awfully complicated when we kind of don't need to. So it's all the same stuff. It gets packaged up differently, and somehow it gets made really complicated.
Yes, we do love complexity sometimes to justify our knowledge.
Yeah, I know, and I get that. But the danger is we might start to make people scared of it, unsure of it, and then others that totally get it and run with it will lead with it. And then sometimes you've got a paradox going on. So what I experienced in the military was a structured system of assessment and priorities. Don't deviate from it. And everybody knew it. It was well drilled. It was well organized. It was very disciplined. Their mantra was, if someone is severely bleeding and it's from an act of aggression, it needs another act of aggression to manage it. That was their attitude. And quite rightly, for some of the environments they operated, that works well. You couldn't do that, though, in a hospital or in a civilian capacity, because the context is different. So if you can take that same structured mindset, that system of priorities in order of severity, and apply it in the circumstance, situation, the environment, the time of day, the location where you are, your constant is the system. You have to adapt and overcome to all those other variables. You can make it work. It just needs to be safe. If it isn't safe, you're not going to go anywhere near it. But like I say, it just needs someone willing to try. So I experienced a real mixed bag. So when I came into the service in Staffordshire, they were being trained by the ambulance service, and I did the first person on scene.
So there was the FPOS, there was the FREC, there was the EMT. No, that's right. Yeah, different variations.
Yeah, and the FREC hadn't been sort of, it hadn't, CallSafe hadn't sort of released it at that point. It was mainly first person on scene at that time. A paramedic delivered that, and I did that course, and again, I felt a little bit awkward at times because I thought, I'm not sure I agree with that. And
that's it, isn't it?
and all the rest of it. And I was horrified at the test at the end because I didn't get as high a score I would have liked. For whatever reason, I thought I should have passed this 100% flying colours, and I didn't. But, for whatever reason, I probably didn't read the questions properly, and all of that lot. But it was interesting and very different. Massively different to the university way of training. Different again.
In what respect? Could you, without going into the depths of complexity, could you take us a little bit deeper as to what the big changes and differences are, perhaps?
It was the direction it was coming from. Okay. The information is all the same: A, B, C, D, E. And if something is really bad, put C before A. Kind of stuff. But it was the mantra. It was the mantra of which it was delivered that made it, either palatable or not. So this is where it comes down to the person delivering it.
100%.
Kind of selling and getting the people in front of them to buy into it, so you get the potential out of them. But it's not everyone's cup of tea, as So
that's what frustrates me, though. And in total transparency, I'm going to be attending one of your courses again very soon. And when I say to other instructors and other trainers, I'm like, you got to love it. You got to put your passion into it. It is a show. It's stand and deliver. Do you know what I mean? And when you mentioned it earlier about being inspired by different training and instructors that you've been to, there is a big aspect to that. People think that just because they know how to do the thing, they can teach the thing. And I say, no, it's almost a completely different beast, because how you present it and the fact that you've got to have a myriad of ways to do it. You've got to have a spectrum of styles that you can flex and go in different directions and be playful. You almost need to sacrifice your own ego at the altar of that person's onboarding, of that person's education. And a lot of people can't do that. They're almost a little bit too cool for school sometimes. And I'm not saying I'm great by any stretch of the imagination. You might see in a few weeks that I'm horrific. But, you've got to be able to get over yourself and think of different ways to communicate it and also inject that passion into it.
I think so. If there's some passion, some enthusiasm, some lightheartedness to it, it kind of works.
Yes.
But then you've got people who are never going to buy into it because of their past experiences or their characters.
Yeah.
And you've just got to accept that. And, you know, and if you can't take them on the journey, you can't take them on the journey. But it just needs somebody willing to try. Everything comes back to that, I think, you know.
100%.
And real world skills for real world use. That's the other thing that, you know, that I believe in, as corny as that sounds, you know. Get rid of the nonsense. What's going to really benefit someone in the heat of the moment?
Yeah.
2 a.m. when they've just tipped out of their bed, or wherever they've ever, you know, attending that RTC. That's what they need to know. And under pressure and stress as well, you know, those kind of human factors, you know.
I think that people's fear about not knowing step number 47 makes them mess up on the first few fundamentals, like you say, just that ABCD. If you can turn up and that first 5 minutes is asserted with confidence, people around you develop confidence within you, and they go, oh yeah, this person, you know, Mike knows what he's doing, he's going to save the day, he's going to help this person. But if you turn around and you're fumbling about trying to get some complex piece of kit to work that you've not really used before, and you're not even covered the fundamentals yet.
No, and the unknown question for many things is a person doesn't know how they're going to react to a situation until they're exposed to it. So it's that first contact with that sort of that skill or that situation. They've then got their answer for how they thought, felt, reacted. So you can build a little bit of resilience and development thereafter. You know, but it's an unknown for many people until they're exposed. So you've got to factor that in too, if you like. You know, so that's where I try and combat it from. So it's a real mixed bag, all the same stuff being delivered, obviously different levels of complexity. But what I found was the game changer was the person delivering it made the biggest difference. You know, and that was the thing. And if you've got
they're the conduit, aren't they? That's the filter that everything's got to come through.
You can have the best course in the world, but if the person delivering the signal isn't good, everything collapses. So that's 100%. Such a fundamental part of it, you know. So that was, you know, that was the main thing that I saw and experienced, you know, and it helped me then think, well, what is the right path to go down? And I've sort of tried to develop an approach that's flexible and encompasses all. And hopefully people won't sort of go mad now, but some of the hardest audiences you can have can be firefighters, you know, on a course, because they're, you know, they may be demotivated, they may be frustrated, you know, they maybe not be busy enough. I don't know. You know, we're going through a very strange time at the moment.
Plus, they didn't pay for it. Sometimes is the case. Like, I think it's with adult education. Things and courses that I've gone on in my adult life that I've invested time, but also put my hand in my own pocket sometimes, is the ones I get the most out of. But not only because I have done that financial interest, because I still have interest when I do it professionally, but sometimes people can get indoctrinated into a service where they have an axe to grind, or like say they've had a bad experience with something in their service, and they can disengage from something that actually could add tremendous value not only to their professional life, but also their personal life.
Oh, you're right. Sometimes the biggest lessons learned are the ones where painful lessons, you know. You know. So it is. So then, from going into UKRO challenges as a competitor, there was an opportunity then to become an assessor. So I thought, right, again, I was seeing people, you know, assessors when I was a competitor in challenges at RTCs, and I'm thinking, I want to be like them. So there was this big guy there called Alan Patterson. He's one of our instructors, and big, well-built guy, Tynan Weir, you know, and all the rest of it. I thought, I like him. I'll never be as tall as him, but I just like what he's doing. There's a couple of other assessors I could see that I liked, you know, and thought they're quite motivational as well. And that was then a sort of a, you know, it was like an opportunity for, right, how do I go down this path? So then I volunteered to get into the UKRO and sort of, you know, then started to mix a little bit more. And again, it was another step closer towards IRRTC than with the people I started to mix with in UKRO, you know.
Because they have a bit more of an entrepreneurial itch as well, and they also have the willingness to get out there and try new things. I think about this also with UK ISAR, because a lot of people do it on a voluntary basis. they are naturally, because they've had to take that extra step and invest that time into it, they're naturally more passionate people. Like they've got that curious itch and they're willing to try different things, and you get far more for your money, even though you're not paying them, ironically.
Yeah, that's it. That's right. And and again, I thought with the UKRO, I thought maybe it will be a little bit more like that military family. Everyone's together, tight little unit. You're with people who think the same, feel the same,
absolutely,
as passionate. That's what I wanted to sort of.
You just turn around and give an instruction, and everyone's just like, yeah, Roger that. There's no like, oh bloody, I can't do it in 5 minutes. We've just sat down, boss. Do you know what I mean? There's none of that. It's just, yeah, sure, Roger that. Let's get it done.
Yeah, that's great. So again, that was a great experience. I wasn't in it for very long, maybe 2 years, but then other opportunities then came up. So I then decided to step away from the Fire and Rescue Service in 2017. And the NHS at the same time. And then I had an opportunity to start doing some training for a private company, and primarily most of their clients were police forces, some fire services, and industry. So then I went in another direction, delivering all the CAB, stuff, but just to a different organisation in a different context. So the majority of the people I would go in front of at that time were then sort of armed police, all the Northwest forces, sort of then maybe.
How did you find them as an audience? Any differences, particularly from, because I know you still work with a lot of police and military.
I started to sense that if I give them a bit of kudos and stroke their egos a little bit, I'm going to maybe get them online a bit more. And then as I learn more about how they operate, because in their world, and this is like the D13, where it gets interesting is there's a national standard of casualty care in the police force, modules 1 to 5 of the first aid learning program. So we're now talking about module 5, which is the enhanced elements, where an authorized firearms officer or a public order medic has to put their medical skills and training together tactically wherever they operate. Okay. So it really is a niche area, and it was a privilege to do it. It really was, because you have to love our British police and the standards they've got and the skills they've got and the challenges they face every day. Seriously. But and
I worry about the future of policing. Honestly, I want to do more episodes around it, because I think it's such a challenging sector, and I think they're just getting such a bad rap internationally. So much stuff at the minute. I worry about people wanting to join it, because we need incredible officers out there. They're kind of the custodians of cultural and moral society. But if we don't make the sector appealing, or like what I'm trying to do with the podcast, and that's why I want to have more police on it, even though it's a Firefighters podcast, it's like I want to celebrate and speak about the incredible people that are in there, because they're fascinating individuals.
Yeah, they are, and they absolutely are, and they do an incredibly demanding job, just like paramedics do, just like firefighters do, just like they do, and and they have very little downtime, and especially the divisional officers that sort of respond to your everyday emergencies, they're the guys that kind of see everything and get really, really, really kind of chewed up and and exposed to stuff, So it was a real privilege to train the police, and they are a hard audience. But again, if you buy into them, give them a bit of kudos. They're not used to being praised. So I brought in this approach of praise them when they've done something well, and a little bit of smoke up their arse, and you start to see that it works. It does work. It does work. So I delivered a course to Greater Manchester at the Tactical Training Centre in Clayton Brook, and the inspector came down to me and said, I've heard the guy saying this is a really good course, and blah, 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 blah. I said, well, cheers, mate. I said, that means a lot, So again, I took that as a big compliment. And I don't think there's anything unique other than my approach sort of was working. I don't think there's anything special about what I was doing. I just think my approach was getting through the kind of, I think they had a perception of what they were going to expect on something that they've got to do. They have to do this training, otherwise they can't carry a gun. Out of their ticket,
mandatory training for them. So
exactly, and nobody wants to be forced to do something. No. So I just tried to make it work, and it did work.
So talk to me about the then origins of IRRTC and sort of getting into what you instruct as part of that now. And I'd love to ask you specifically around some of the trench rescue work, because that's a kind of exploding sector that didn't really exist for a while.
Okay, so I'm doing this self-employed work for as a self-employed instructor, which gives me the freedom to do other things. So then I'm out of the service now. I'm out of the NHS, but I'm still in contact with Neil. And Neil says to me, "Look, tell you what, there's a there's a humanitarian project going on for fire aid, and we're going to go out to Tajikistan, blah 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 blah, and we're going to train the first ever cohort of road traffic collision instructors." So three of us went out, a team went out, and Neil brought some guys in from the UKRO, and some of them went up into the Corrug, up into the mountains, and me, Neil, and Steve, we went to Dushanbe, the capital, and we were there for 2 weeks, and and through an interpreter, you know, um, Steve and Neil delivered the technical and the rescue side, and I tried to cover the medical elements, only very basically through an interpreter, just so they'd have some knowledge of what to do in priority order. And it was challenging, but I'd done it in the military through an interpreter in the past, so I was used to that. And I really enjoyed it. And whilst we were out there, I'm sure Neil told you this story, we just came up with this idea of, when people retire, what are they going to do if they're still passionate about RTC?
All of that colossal amount of knowledge just gets lost, doesn't it?
So the idea came up with of, well, if we started a rescue company up specializing in this, we're going to be doing something we love. Hopefully it would be beneficial to somebody if we can convince them to come through the front door. And there's nothing better than that. So we listed the company there and then, and it started, and that was 2017. And we spent 3 years building things in the background. I think we delivered our first commercial course in 2020.
Wow.
So to the Irish Defence Forces over in Camp Curragh in the Republic of Ireland. And then from there, we started with heavy vehicle rescue, road traffic collision, and little things are now starting to evolve. It's still a very small seed, Pete, but hopefully it's going to start to develop at some point.
I think it already has. And again, that's that aspect of that self-deprecating. You guys have grown arms and legs, and there's different aspects to the company and the business now, and the plethora of courses that you have. And again, we'll reference the website in the notes for people to have a look at that. But it really has grown arms and legs, and you've trained a colossal amount of people. I hear great references from guests on the podcast. Listen,
so that's the thing. Be honest now. Is the word on the street about us good? Because that is all I bloody care about,
Yeah. Man, that's the podcast all over. We're not featured in any bloody magazines. The only reason it reaches the thousands and thousands of people that read, it's all word of mouth. We don't do any paid advertisement or anything like. We never have done. Yeah. It just seems to grow because, and we said it before we came on about, does it sound right? Does it sound? It's authentic. It's authentic from people that we're not perfect. We didn't invent the emergency services, but it's that authenticity that people want to connect with. Some things just get so polished and become detached from the reason that we even wanted to engage with it in the first place.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right, and you get such a wide expanse of guests on the podcast that you obviously get to see this from a very broad sphere.
Yes.
So here we are now. Third year of the business operating commercially, and as well as heavy vehicle rescue, as well as RTCI. I have to thank our technical instructors, Kev Mitz and Alan Patterson on the heavy vehicle rescue side there. They're just absolute heavy rescue geeks and decades of experience. And I guess we're as good as our instructors, So big thanks and huge appreciation to them. And so with them thinking, okay, what are things can we tap into where there's a need and a benefit? Okay. There's got to be a benefit here to the learner and the students. So we started to look at the trench rescue side of things because we thought, well, hang on, how do services prepare and train for that?
They don't.
Well, they don't.
They just look at national operational guidance and then do the best from there.
And that's okay. So it wasn't easy to get off the ground. We've got a lot of challenges, but we thought, right, how can we put something together that would be beneficial in the real world, serve people to come on? Because if they ever go to one of these incidents at some point, it's not going to be easy to deal with. And, and all we want to do is prevent a disaster because there's no point in learning from a disaster if you can prevent one. So,
No. And there's a lot of instances of it happening and stuff like that. I was looking before we came on, just from a UK and a US perspective. And just as a micro example for people, there was like 2016-17, the list, there's 9 deaths related to excavation and trenches occurring that had nothing to do with even poorly reinforced walls. They included things like getting crushed from storm pipes, slowing into trenches, and disassembly of trench boxes, people getting drowned. There was an instance of drownings where water pipes had broken. And there's so many developments and stuff happening. There was also one about 5 construction workers were digging a trench in basements, and this made me think a lot about London as well, where large building developments are going on. They overcame with breathing difficulties, and it was nitrogen dioxide and other things that we pull up out of the ground. When you're in those confined spaces, had an all different element to it. When you think it's just construction work, when you're in a confined space or in a trench like that, there's so many more dynamics to really bring into the thought process of a risk assessment, I suppose.
There is, and if you think about it from a contractor's point of view, as human beings, we'll try and do something a bit quicker. We'll try and cut a corner because it's in our nature to do so. If a constructor's digging an excavation in the ground, they're going to put the spoil pile quite close to potentially where their excavation is because it's a bit quicker to fill it in. And so, this is a game of snooker like everything. You've got to think a few moves ahead. Of course, when it goes wrong, it can be disastrous. And that's why the course exists, to try and raise a little bit of awareness. We offer, obviously, a qualification in it, a 2-day introduction, a 5-day rescue technician for organizations that would have to respond to it professionally, just so they've got a system of work. And they're going to do something effective,
So if we look at that 2-day awareness one for a second, if we just try and take a whistle stop tour in that, because I was looking at the sort of overarching hazards, and because even if people aren't going to an incident where they'll be carrying out a rescue, I live in quite an agricultural area, and from dikes to trench building to even all of the construction that's going on in the areas. If you could run us through some of those hazards and just, I suppose, a general awareness for people that are attending incidents that they don't initially believe to be anything to do with a trench, but the sheer physical makeup of what we would describe as a trench is something you will actually find in far more places than you think.
Yeah, I mean, we're maybe not talking about things that are now 10 feet deep, although in some places there might be. It might only be shallow. It might be sort of excavations around building sites, utility work, whatever. But there are risks there that we've become blasé to. So let's say now we had a contractor, a utility company, which is the first thing that comes to mind, and there's an accident. There's some kind of medical event in the trench from the worker. There's some kind of slip trip hazard. There's some kind of failure of a system of work or an injury, or that trench fails for whatever reason because of the ground, the type of soil composition, the environment.
Even if it's just a visitor to the site that falls in it overnight, vandals breaking in, these things happen, not always on the day. They happen in the middle of the night when people aren't paying attention.
They do. So now, let's say now we have we're in a shire service, and we have an on-call crew respond to that. What are they going to understand potentially about the risks of that particular incident? What training have they got? What SOPs, procedures, policies they're going to fall back on? Commensurate with what they're now going to face, and they may do a wonderful job. They may not. But no one is offering any input on it, apart from maybe a bit of Learn Pro, PDR Pro, whatever you want to call it. Whatever your service uses, My Learning, whatever your service uses, you can't have an information e-learning package on it to prepare for this. We've got to raise awareness of the risks so you understand them, so then you can develop an effective, safe approach. And if you have to carry out a rescue, we want it to be safe, effective, and casualty-centered. But what we don't want is people being injured or being killed, and you could with a trench. So, that's the thing.
Even your immediate presence in arriving to it, by bringing more people around the environment, you add an immediate risk of, reducing those cave-ins. The fact that it itself is an oxygen-deficient environment, you've got to start thinking about the flammables, the combustibles, the fact it's explosive, access and egress, things like that. You think you're just going to jump in there. Okay, you can jump in there as old as you like, but how are you going to get out quickly, in the event of the trench beginning to fail? If you're in a shire brigade, it's wet and it's boggy. Where's the soil that's been excavated out of that thing? Where's that stored? And all of those things need to be already embedded in the mind, don't they?
You're right, and the real eye opener has been, when we were putting this together and testing it, and we had the first course we ran was sort of a quality assurance course for ourselves, really, where we had Nigel Leatherby come over from Paratech in the USA, and obviously that's where all of most of the trench rescue expertise is going to be. The MUSAR Academy out there.
For people that are unfamiliar with Paratech, sorry, if you could just give us an overarching description of what that company is and how we use it, because a lot of people will see it on USAR rigs, but that is still only a small population of the services.
Yeah, I mean, my colleague Kev Mitson needs to be here now, who obviously works for Vimpex, and Vimpex are the sole distributor for Paratech in the UK. So let me get that in before I get a message.
We'll fumble through it, don't worry.
So Paratech is an awesome company. They make some of the world's best rescue resources, be it for stabilization, be it for industrial use, be it for professional rescue. It's flaming expensive stuff, but you get what you pay for.
It lasts as well. We've had some of the stuff for decades, I think.
Yeah, it's top quality stuff, but it comes at a price.
Yeah.
So you've got to balance those two out. So because we're going down the route of maybe trying to set up a Paratech Academy, because dealing with over there in America, they do trench rescue training in Europe, but we propose that, well, listen, I'll tell you what, how about we put this through as a qualification so it's kind of recognized outside of your organization that you work for.
100%.
It means something that, people are getting something that is more than a certificate. The main thing they get from it is the experience of coming on the course and the skills that they learn. But to get a qualification that's recognized outside your organization is good. So we thought that was a win. And so in all the talks we had, Nigel came over and looked at what we were doing and how we were doing it and gave us a few tips and pointers, and we tweaked it again. And then we started running them. And our first course was somebody coming over from a mining organization, ERT team in Zambia, where they've got very deep excavations and serious risks. We had a USAR crew come on from one of the national resilience teams, and we thought, well, the USAR guys, let's just see now, given their expertise and their specialisms and their knowledge, let's just see what they think of this, and let's just kind of see how they react. And as we went through the course, and our eyes were really opened, because they were surprised at how little they knew about what they should know about, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So that was quite an eye opener, and I mean that in not a negative way.
Yeah, no, 100%.
So
that's exactly the feelings I had when I first did some work with Mines Rescue, and then they spoke about where the origins of some of their work had come from and what the mine safety used to look like and how it's transitioned to where we are now, and then starting to learn a lot more about the environment that you think you're entering into. Because I also experienced a lot of this in manufacturing, where we would have trenches at the back of the site where we would dump certain stuff. I'm not sure we were supposed to be, but then we also had silos, and we had different variations of complex hazardous environments that we weren't really familiar with, because they're now something that you would see in the day-to-day life, but they're big enough to put a human in. And when you start putting a human inside these things, like a trench or a silo or anything like that, it brings with it a whole nother sphere of thought that needs to go into what you're doing.
You're absolutely right, Pete. You're absolutely right. It's a little bit like, I always use this iceberg analogy, which a lot of people use. You see that little bit above the surface of the water, but there's so much more beneath that water line that you may not realize or not know is there. And that's kind of the methodology of what we're trying to get over here. You cannot know everything in a service, because there's so many occupational competencies for FRS to maintain. But here we thought there is a benefit to putting this on, from the practical exposure, the theoretical exposure, the challenges of an incident. It's not going to be a quick incident from beginning to end, but the risk that's associated with it is huge. So for organizations that have a corporate responsibility and a liability to their professional rescuers, how would they be preparing their professional rescuers to these
that is the big shift. Sorry to interrupt you, but the difference between when we do it in manufacturing, everything's planned and slowed. Whereas when you take all of that stuff, and I think about it with rope rescue as well, you don't. I always think when I turn up at these incidents, I'm like, slow down. Oh, I just keep saying it to myself, slow down, slow down,
Yeah.
slow down. But you're in an emergency situation, so there's always that, pressure, communal pressure for you to
Yeah.
actually take action, for you to be seen to be doing something. And you are doing something, but
Yeah.
trench rescues, urban search and rescue, collapse buildings, rope, you really need to slow down and get that safe system in work.
Yeah, because if something goes wrong, someone's going to look at it afterwards and say, "Was this foreseeable,
Yeah.
avoidable, and
Tell
preventable?"
us why Mike died. And you're like, oh,
Yeah,
shit.
and that's when kind of the head shed, the powers that be of that rescue organisation are really going to be twitchy when that
Yeah.
when there's an investigation done and an independent expert comes in to have a look around, and that's when the magnifying glass comes out. So this
Yeah.
is all about kind of preventing that by just preparing people. And if
Mhm.
something does go wrong and you follow procedure and it's documented and you can evidence what you've done,
Mhm.
it's a much better place to be. So look,
Yeah.
so we looked at sort of what trenches are used. We looked at the key components of incident command at a trench rescue. How can we make that fit the mindset of the FRS in every incident they go to, so it works? We thought, well, we need to understand people about soil types.
Yeah.
And so the USAR guys, we said, well, tell us something about soil composition, guys, given
Yeah.
and again, it's putting them on the spot a little bit, but we wanted to give kudos to their expertise and their subject matter as well. But we wanted to sort of, genuinely tease out what they knew. And
Yeah.
they were surprised to understand the differences with the soil types and the implications that might mean at an excavation. So
I learned a little bit about this again from my old man, because he ran a building firm for 50 something years, and it was like when you would order concrete, it was always measured in the slump. So they would
yeah,
speak about the slump of the concrete, and if you would put in posts or if you were doing foundations. So then he started bringing, because he was a real geek with the same sort of thing. Like, he wasn't just a builder. I'm sure everyone had said this about their dad, but he really got geeky about how things worked and how archways were built. So he started talking to me about things like the angle of repose, and that critical angle of repose, and the granularity of the material, and the steepest angle of descent, and you kind of get really, really into that. And people think, oh yeah, whatever, it doesn't matter. But in the simplest fashion, we've all dug a hole at the seaside. And then when you get too close to it, or it reaches a certain pivoting point, or depending how far away you are from the hole, you can cause it to collapse, or the different types of sand as you go away. And that's as simplistic as he could ever explain it to me, I suppose, as a child.
he's so right. If you dig a hole into the ground, it sounds corny, but Mother Nature will want to fill it in again, and
Of course.
eventually, it will do with the aid of gravity.
Yeah.
It just depends what kind of ground you've got. Because if you've got stable rock, well, that's really safe.
Mm.
Nothing's really going to disturb that, unless you start blowing it apart with
And it depends on the
C3
composition
or
of it as
C4.
well, doesn't
Yeah,
it? Because
of
it's
course
all
it
about
does.
solvents and water. Because he always used to say like water is like a connective particle. It says it brings that electrostatic attraction of the water to the mineral surface. But past a certain point, there's a point of diminishing return where something gets so wet that it
100%.
shifts. And
100%.
you may not be able to apply all of this in the moment, but to have that holistic knowledge in the back of your head as you approach these incidents gives you a subconscious indicators about where to stand and what to do, and you start building more layers to the picture of what an incident looks like.
You're absolutely right. So again, we took the backwards and we said, so this is type A, type B, type C soil. There are two subtypes of type C, and now what you've got to think is recognize what type of ground you've got, what type of soil composition it is, because it's going to dictate how unstable that excavation might be, and how better or worse you might be making it now, depending on your scene of operations. So that was a real eye opener for them. And we, at the training center where we are, we have type C granular soil, which is sandy, unstable, it's constantly moving, and it's also on a gradient. And so when it rains, there's a water table there too. It can fill up really quickly, but it also drains away really quickly.
Yeah.
But it's very unstable. It is dynamic soil. So when the trench is dug, the excavate, and we usually dig it 6 feet down, sometimes more, 5 foot wide. It's really big. Yes, it is. We could dig smaller ones, but that's a real opener then when you've got that and you can hear the soil moving.
Yeah.
So, and it changes by the day, by the hour. Things start to fall in. We can collapse a small part of it. So, and that's when they realize, shit, this is
You've got to be interested in the mechanics of that. Do you know what I mean? Where what those other factors are, from the environment to the temperature to whether it's rained to
Massively.
the bogginess,
Massively.
and that almost, they call it the coefficient of that static friction, don't they? Where an object can stay at rest on an inclined plane before it begins to slide, and depending on what point that excavation's at, will add sort of factors into that. Because I was looking on some of the photos and stuff on the 2-day and 5-day awareness stuff, and it's they're effectively putting that safe system of work, I think, in a few of these before they even get to work. Obviously, they're in all the safe working at height rig, because again, that has to be a factor that people include, that working at height isn't just a loft; it's any place of which you can take a fall and injure yourself. So we see them in there with their OSB boards, and now I think they look like 4x2s with working alongside the Paratech. Is it?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. So we've got a system in place where we can shore that trench up, and the idea is the trench is shored up if there's a need to rescue someone, to make it safe for the rescuers going in. But do you know what? If you're a casualty that's fallen in or injured, could get themselves out and you could drop a ladder in, why wouldn't you do that without going to? So again, it depends on circumstance, situation. But in the UK now, I guess the confined space regulations would kick in, as a trench is an element of a confined space hazard, isn't it?
Yeah,
and
that brings in a whole nother layer, doesn't it?
So of course it does. Now in America, it's slightly different, but here we've got to make our training safe, because you haven't got sort of operational discretion that you would have at an operational incident. So firstly, the training's got to be safe, and it has to be.
Yeah.
But we make it very realistic. They set up their own safe system of work, or we show them how to do that, because they've got a 6-7 foot trench, which the working at height regs kick in. It's also a confined space, and it's going to have free flowing solids in it, maybe water. What's the weather like? So
that's the thing you got to think, because a lot of time these trenches are being dug because there's some sort of services being put in place. So there will be the opportunity for flowing pipe. There might be gas in there. There might be anything.
And that's
even if the hazard isn't in there yet. Simply by disturbing earth at that depth, you will be digging up toxins and gases and decomposing things that will add in their own aspects of hazards.
Of course you will. So that's when we then think, well, if we've got an environment that isn't safe, what's you going to consider? So we'd put a gas monitor down there. So we'd say, well, okay, tell us a bit more. So then,
don't just say something. You've got to be able to say the why behind it. Just shout pieces of equipment and go, yeah, I know that one, Mike. Okay, tell me about it.
Well, this is it. So one of the guys, Rob, that's on the course with me, absolutely brilliant guy. The best can-do attitude I think I know in anyone. He never says no, but he'll try and find a reason why, or try and find a reason how. So Rob delivers the because Rob's a confined space trainer. He's a water rescue instructor. He does atmospheric.
I'd love to have a chat with him as well.
He is brilliant, mate, and he's so good because he's in the fire and rescue service himself. He works for sort of Rescue 3 amongst others. And so obviously he's a very experienced instructor, but he's discovered all of this because of research. And when he was concerned that incidents he was being exposed to, training he was getting way back, wasn't really effective and real world beneficial. So it made him want to get into that world to instruct it. And that's why he's so good at what he does. So when we started to ask these guys about how you're going to atmospherically monitor, and what does your monitors do? How many alarms has it got? How do they operate? Do you know what your short-term and long-term exposure limits are? They then that's when we started to see the body language and the non-verbal cues starting to change. So we thought then, now you can see why you're kind of here, because you might have known this once upon a time and forgotten about it, but we definitely need it now. Yeah. Because, because of the environment you're going to operate in. So it really started to prove a point with even USAR crews, technical rescue crews. So I'm thinking, if these guys don't miss, what's your on-call crew coming out to this initially? What are they going to do? What are they going to realize?
Yeah, absolutely, because they're going to have to be appeared to do something. So what's the still safe diluted version of that. When you're in production and you're putting a company together or a product, it's like, what's the least viable option? What's the safest, smallest viable option with the least risk, where we can at least make an assessment.
Yeah.
I mean, if the casualty's down there and they're breathing, then to an extent you have to assume it's a respirable atmosphere. So what can we do? If they're down there, they're not moving, it maybe changes the fundamentals a little bit. They're not showing any signs of life. That kind of helps us in a horrible way. But also, if they are, they've only recently fallen, the so-and-so, the partner, the dog is stood next to it barking its head off, and the handler's fallen in, what do we do then? Because that on-call crew needs to be seen to be doing something.
And this is the thing. And so then we say to, well, tell us about your gas monitors. When are they calibrated? How would you do a bump test on it? What's a bump test in actual fact?
What is it? There's a bump test. It's a blow test. There's 3 tests that we do on, because I worked at a hazardous detection, identification, monitoring service for a little while, and we used to have to carry out 3 tests when we got them off. Yeah, it was a blow test, a bump test. I can't remember what them all ones are, but yeah, you're right. And I'd be expected to get it off and be able to know that it worked.
And if you've not used that bit of kit now for 3 or 4 months, you can understand that perishable knowledge is lost.
Yeah.
Understandably, So again, actually, is it even calibrated in accordance with the manufacturer's guideline every 6 months?
It's alarming. Okay, what does that mean then? Well, it might even mean you can stay in here for 8 hours, but it's just letting you know that you're at that, lower explosive, upper explosive. You might be at that level of exposure. Doesn't mean you've got to get out right now. Might just be an indicator, but if you don't understand it, then you're not going to know what information it's giving you.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. What's that trench been dug for? Does it have any life services still running in it? Are they isolated? What's your gas monitor picking up? O2, H2S, LEL. What's the HEL? Carbon monoxide, whatever it is, whatever's in there. Is it now a risk to you? And is it one of that casualties in there? In the state they're in. And again, now what's your protocol, your procedure, your SOP? So now we've got to think about what's the rescuers' exposure limits. What are they allowed to be exposed to?
How can we ventilate it if we need to? Can we put some forced ventilation in there? What other solutions have we got?
Yeah,
because a lot of crews, even though they're not, we're not a USAR rig, you have got a fan, you have got a positive pressure ventilation system on your truck. Is there an ability to manipulate that?
Yeah, but if it's petrol driven, is that going to be part of the problem?
Exactly. There's a lot of electric ones coming out on the trucks now we can take into high-rise buildings as well. But you're right, it has to be that consideration. Don't just knee-jerk and go, let's get that. Well, if it's petrol driven, you're introducing another hazard there. So it's all of those factors, isn't it?
It is. And what I've come to realize is no 2 services work the same. They've all got their own individual policies behind the scenes. So it makes it sort of,
so common sense isn't commonplace in the fire service.
No, so it looks the same on the outside to the public, but they're quite different behind the scenes. As a police force and ambulance services, so there's all these little variables that we feed into the course, but the atmospheric monitoring one is a huge one. And on the last day of the course, we always give people an opportunity to confirm their knowledge back to us. And the past 2 courses we've done, they've been able to do that. And the question they asked for is, can you go over that atmospheric monitoring stuff again? Because it blew my mind.
Yeah.
Because then they've now realized.
It's like an atom in itself, isn't it? It's like when you crack an atom and it explodes into a million questions and you're like, oh, wow, you could do a 5-day course on that in itself, but some services might not justify it.
You could. And, and then they realized that they've either been using it wrong, misunderstood it, the device isn't working properly at other operational incidents I've been to, and they've just realised that there and then. So that's one good element of the course. There are many others, but it is truly beneficial to come on it, and we tweak it as per the learner's experience. So because for us, it's all about those people in front of us, their experience, their benefit. Are they taking real world knowledge now away that they can use, influence others? If they are, we're doing our job right. If they're not, then we need to fix something, and we need to fix it now. It's that kind of attitude really that we have, and nothing is taken for granted.
So, Mike, we're obviously speaking all about trench rescue there, and we've gone in kind of, and it's my fault really. We've gone in a million
All right.
directions. Could you just help me separate out the two, and for, or I suppose for listeners and services and chiefs of training departments or whatever they might be, what bits are actually in the 2 day and what's in the 5 day? And maybe like, if people were looking at, they heard this and they think, we definitely want to send a couple of people on that. Who is best people pitch into the 2 day? Where do you think that kind of lives in people's development versus the value people would get additionally in the 5 day?
The idea of the 2 day is it gives that awareness of the trench rescue for, say, a tactical advisor, a mentoring officer, or an initial attending crew, or
Okay.
So again, we don't go into the complexities and the depths of the 5 day technician course, but the methodology is still there as to why this is such a risk, why you need
Kind
to
of
know
station
about this.
managers, group managers, potentially people that would be going on scene and overseeing the safe systems of work around it. It gives them a whistle stop tour, like you said, as a tactical advisor to understand what looks right and what doesn't look right.
Definitely, and based on previous experiences and previous incidents in the UK, there's a massive need for that. And they're getting an accredited SFJ award, which means something, quality assured, all of that.
100%. We just had Candice Miller, the head of SFJ Awards. She's just been on, so she actually mentioned you guys, and it's great to see more people coming into recognizing that you are in adult education and having a formal qualification in something is extremely important. But what you said there, sorry, because when station there's a lot of people jumping through ranks these days, and they'll find themselves turning up to an incident, and they actually do have overall responsibility. So if it does go upside down, back to front, and start spiraling quickly, it'll be them that is held accountable to it. So that aspect too of awareness in that 2 day is especially important for people rising through the ranks, I think.
I guess it is, but services are changing, and it's whatever priority that service is working towards now.
Yeah.
My worry with the trench situation is like the growing electric vehicle dilemma. It's sort of, there's a huge gap there that we need to target.
We're getting away with it a little bit at the minute, and it's going to bite us in the bum.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think so. And all we want to do is prepare people for these infrequent but seriously risky incidents, so that they do the right thing one day.
I said it before, mate. I think because land is the one thing we're not building any more of. So as we start to build houses and stuff everywhere, people and again, I reference back to London. People will go up for as long as they can, and they'll go outwards as long as they can, and eventually people will start going down. A lot more people are building things in their backyards. They're buying plots of land and digging down into them. I do see this being a growing factor that we're going to need to address in the emergency services.
Yeah, let's see. But all we want to do is, if there's a benefit we can offer and expose professional rescuers and other industries to this, then we want to be able to do that so they genuinely are more skilled and knowledgeable.
Well, speaking about that other industries aspect, sorry, I was reading recently that you guys had done some work with the military. You've been part of a big military study as well. Was that right?
Yeah, I think, So there's Alistair leads this at the Defence Medical Services in Lichfield. And I hope he doesn't mind me saying, Neil's had a lot of contact with Alistair. I've not had much, but University College London, the project is called Project Packington. And, a lot of people already know about this out there, and they may well have been approached for interview by University College London. The researchers.
Assume people won't, because honestly, the first time I spoke to you today is the first time I heard of it. So I'm just pulling up a little bit of information about Project Packington, but it's quite news to me, to be honest.
Yeah. So the long and short of it is, it's something the military have identified that it's all about how well are they prepared to rescue themselves from military vehicles. What's the understanding? What's the capability? What are the risks? There are massive risks. There's a huge gap in understanding who is best placed to sort of target. So as I understand it, the University College London were tasked with, doing some research, and what's come into it is, external innovators like ourselves, the UKRO, and there's like this pyramid of from external innovation to best practice to implementation towards the top. And exit sort of features in there. You had Tim Nutbeam on.
That was a recent great episode. Fascinating.
He's great, isn't he? I'm hopefully having a chat with him about something.
Mate, you guys should do some work together. You and Tim would be awesome.
Well, I don't know, but Tim's diary is a lot more congested than mine at
We're
the
all
moment.
busy. We're all busy.
So I'm, hopefully that'll happen soon. But the general vein of it is that even the military now are looking at, how they could carry out a rescue from, from a military vehicle, whether that be an armored one or otherwise. And where's the capability, the tools and knowledge going to come from to implement that? And that's what Project Paddington was essentially about, collaborating, stakeholders and experts together to try and find
I think
a
I remember
solution.
speaking to perhaps one of your colleagues before about having almost like what does the equipment even look like? Like is it a combi tool
Sure,
in a bag? Is it an hydraulic style thing? Is it a
sure.
different brand or company? How far into those 6 steps of RTC do we need to go with them? And how can you give them again that least viable product that if somebody is even like in private security sectors, you know what I mean? If somebody is assigned to protect somebody and they experience a road traffic collision, what do they need to do? Because again, it's an assumption that people from a military background will have this overarching knowledge, but you'll have seen firsthand, and we've had, ex-services individuals from special forces and Marines and otherwise on, when they say they experience contact and they have scenarios with an overturned vehicle, and with the greatest respect, it doesn't look good. From that's their words, not mine. I mean, they
No,
used a little bit more
no,
colorful words, but they're
no,
like,
no.
they kind of
That's
just
right.
improvise, adapt, and overcome and fumbled through it.
So, and again, so that's what they've recognised. So they've, why does it matter? Who's at risk? Who does it matter to? And there's, the coroner's deaths, the extrications rarely drilled in the military.
Yeah.
It's 87% of CMTs couldn't identify, how to use cutting tools, and 64% of military CMTs describe conflicting priorities. So who takes priority here? REMI, RAMC, all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. There's external innovators, there's best practice, there's practice, innovation, and integration. They then need to adapt it, and it then needs to be implemented. And I guess who would implement it is RAMC and REMI, I suppose.
Okay.
But that's, again, we'll have to see where that goes. From an IRRTC point of view, we're just an external innovator along with UKRO and others. But again, it's nice to be on the periphery of that. Yeah, and that then feeds into the specialist rescue responder advanced and the introduction that we have, where it's designed for military, remote operators, self-sufficiency in mind. If a vehicle's involved in an incident, it's all about self-sufficiency, understanding the risk, understanding the environment, understanding the location and the time of day, adapting to it. If no one's coming to help you, you need to help yourself. So the thinking is, there is no one coming, this is all on you. So we just teach them self-sufficiency, and everything they carry is everything they've got to look after themselves. And we've run that for the Royal Marines and some government organisations, and already.
Oh, mate, I'd love to be a fly on the wall to observe one of those courses. That'd be incredible. Because again, just seeing those learning journeys from people that turn up who are already competent, proficient experts in their sector, but opening them up again to another factor they need to consider like this.
Well, we had a course. One of the courses that comes to mind was where we had a government agency on it and the Royal Marines on it together, and
Wow.
they operated together. And I have to tell you, the Royal Marines, the commando engineers that were on that course were fantastic. In a week, the way they could operate a recip saw was phenomenal, and I can't praise those guys enough.
Yeah.
They know who they are. These commando engineers, but they were fantastic, and it was a real privilege to have them for a week, and they really, really, really represented their organisation, as good as you could ever expect. So we realised then that this is a great course. This really works. We need to get it out there and raise awareness of it. So.
But isn't that surreal though? Because even at the beginning of this conversation, you were saying like, oh, well, I mean, we're only 3 years in our infancy and we're trying to do this. And then you've just gone on and listed over this past. I mean, we've been talking for like an hour and a half now. The incredible organizations. And, these are government level organizations. They're not some rinky dink, just little somebody from the arse end of nowhere. These are big players in the industry that you've been able to connect with in what is really a tremendously short period of time, and produce products and courses that are adding tangible value to the people in their operational roles. So again, we come back to that self-deprecating side of it. I think you and the team and all the instructors and whatnot at IRRTC really need to have that bit of self-reflection and recognize how far you've come sometimes.
Yeah, we do, Pete. We try to, but sometimes you get lost in the everyday.
You're living in the
Everydayness of it
moment.
all,
You're
you
so
know.
focused on the
And
problems now. But even mate, getting the
yeah,
SFJ, accreditation. A lot of services out there are trying to do that, and they're realizing how difficult it is. And you guys seem to have nailed it.
well, there's not many tweets that I put on Twitter that Candace doesn't like or retweet. So
There you
I'm
go.
really great. I'm really great that she feels that way about us. That she
I know
does.
she's got
But
strong values
you
as
know,
well, so she wouldn't do it if she wouldn't just do it as a
no.
favor. She wouldn't align herself and or the company or the organization with people that had poor values, morals, or were doing it for nefarious means. So I think it's kind of it's a cyclical relationship.
It is. It is. And one thing I want to just mention here. I know time's getting short, Pete, but IRRTC, they're not up on a pedestal, Pete. We're a cog in a machine, and if there's anybody else we can sort of collaborate with, we would be willing to look at that because it's forward in unity.
Yeah.
You make as many friends on the way up as you can because on the way down you don't know whose help you need. I know that's very old, but
But no, mate. But you do that by becoming the eternal student or remaining the eternal student. Sorry, it's
yeah,
something we've referenced many times. You never
yeah,
feel like the finished product, and I always call the podcast learning out loud because no matter who I've spoken to or what I've done or the courses I get invited on or experiences I go on nationally or internationally, you never know it all. You never the finished product because everything's changing,
no.
and it's exactly what we said at the beginning of our conversation.
No, absolutely. And one of the companies I work for freelance is a company called Trauma Resource, and they deliver to a lot of fire services, airport services, a lot of the offshore global wind organization. And, again, I just want to give them a shout because, the structure and the infrastructure they've got behind the scenes is phenomenal and their quality standards. And so that still keeps me in touch with a lot of fire services from the IEC medical trauma side of things, which I'm very pleased to say I'm happy to do. So that it keeps the rescue side of it kind of joined. It keeps that full circle kind of revolving,
Well,
Because
mate, you'll have to do as an introduction. This, and again, this similar to what you were just saying about Candice. If it's a tick in the box from you and the guys at IRRTC, then it's a company I'd love to, speak to and be able to give them that support and just learn a little bit more about where they're started because I'm sure they have a fascinating origin story in itself.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So that's where we're up to. It's just a small part of what we do, and if people want to go and have a look at the website, they can find out more. We're on all the social media platforms: LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Neil does the Facebook side of it. I kind of don't, but
It's all
I'll
there, brother.
is,
And we'll put all those notes in the bottom
yeah,
notes for the podcast as well. So people can just scroll down now, take a look at where they're from. Mate, I've absolutely enjoyed that. I really appreciate it. I know I know we're running into a weekend and I know you're prepping for courses and stuff like that. So I really want to say thank you for, taking time out of your busy life to be here with us for what's been, an hour and a half plus now.
That's okay. That's okay. Just try and make me sound good, Pete, in your editing. Because
mate, the guest always sounds good. Honestly, when I'm listening back to these things, I'm always rolling my eyes like, "Oh, Pete, will you shut up waffling?
No,
You've got a
I
subject matter expert with you, and I'm the one that keeps interrupting. It's a habit I'm trying to get better at."
No. I'm grateful to you, mate. I know I'm going to stress about what I sound like now afterwards because I don't like the sound of my own voice. I really don't.
You'll be great. I always say people forget what you say and all that sort of stuff. They always remember how you made them feel. And we've gone in some wonderful directions today. And like you say, just about the courses at RTC, people, even if they take away one or two nuggets, which I know they will, because this is a forest full of nuggets of knowledge that we've gone through during this conversation, there'll be many different things that different people take from it, depending on their sector, depending on where they're at in their own journey, whether they're a base level recruit, whether they're going into different levels of development, or whether they're at the tippy top and they're looking at how to develop their staff and continue to innovate as they bring their service into the 21st century and the hazards that we're facing. So I really appreciate that, my man. I will let you go, but really appreciate you taking the time this morning, and send my love to all the team, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, mate. You're very kind.
Firefighters podcast is put together to develop, inspire, and hopefully even motivate those individuals who have chosen to serve our communities and be part of the first responder family. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield. If you have enjoyed today's episode and you want to see the podcast continuing, please head over to our Patreon page where you can support the ongoing efforts of the podcast. Please hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on whatever platform you're listening to. Please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.